You know how people always say the family home is the safest place on earth? That's hogwash. It's the biggest lie I've ever heard. Because it was right inside my own house, in the childhood room with dolls on the shelf and crayon pictures on the wall, that my brother did things so vile I can't imagine the devil himself would dare. And my father, well, my father always treated that boy like the center of the universe. Even now at 73, I can still hear that gravelly voice booming. Making stuff up again, girl, making stories as if the baby you grew at 14 was some figment of your imagination. My name's Emily Harper, but folks around here call me Miss Emily. I came into this world in 1951, right here in Oakage, Tennessee. It was an era when children's words rarely mattered, especially for girls. We were supposed to keep our mouths shut, obey, and be grateful for whatever crumbs of life we were given. Today, sitting on the porch of my plain, honest little house on a sweltering July afternoon, I've made up my mind to speak the story I've held in silence for nearly 60 years. This isn't a story that smells like roses. It's the kind that knots your stomach and makes you want to hide your ears, but it has to be told because I know there are girls out there living through the same nightmare and thinking they're all alone. If you're listening, tell me in the comments where you're from. I want to know whether my voice reaches across this country. And if you can, hit like and subscribe because every like and comment gives me a little more courage to name the things people prefer to sweep under the rug. I remember the first time I knew something was very wrong in my family like it happened yesterday. I must have been around 7, playing house out in the yard, when I heard my father yelling at my mother in the kitchen. It wasn't unusual, he yelled a lot, but that time had a different tone. "Martha, stop fussing over that girl. Let her learn her place. I'm in charge here." And him and Ethan, my older brother, Ethan was 5 years older than me, were already on the same page. Ethan had dark hair, was tall for his age, and had green eyes that didn't come from any of the rest of us, since the family mostly had brown eyes. The neighbors always said he was handsome and would break a lot of hearts, never guessing the first heart he'd break would be mine. My father, Robert Harper, was one of those men who belonged to the wrong century in his head. He thought women existed to serve, that men didn't show feelings, and that a single boy was worth more than 10 girls. He worked at the nuclear plant. What he did exactly I never really knew, but he came home reeking of whiskey and cigarettes. When he was in a good mood he pretended I didn't exist. When he wasn't, it was safer for me to vanish. My mother, Grace Harper, her name suited her because she was a saint, kept her hair always in a tight bun and had hands rough from ironing other people's laundry. She did her best, bless her, to shield me. But there wasn't much she could do against my father. "Stay quiet, baby," she'd whisper when Daddy started his roaring. "It'll pass. It'll pass." We lived in one of those little 3-room houses, the living room that pulled triple duty, my parents' bedroom, and a tiny back room that Ethan and I shared. When I was small we got along fine. He taught me how to climb trees, how to fish in the creek behind the house, even how to whistle. But as I grew older things shifted. It started gradually. A hand that lingered too long here. A look that set my skin on fire there. I didn't understand, I was a child after all. I thought it was normal for a sibling to hug close or to want to sleep near each other, even though he had his own bed beside mine. Sometimes my mother would come in the night and find him in my bed. "Ethan, go to your own bed, boy," she'd say. But he always had an excuse, afraid of thunder, too cold, missing when he was little. My father loved those scenes. "Look how much they love each other, now that's a family," he'd say, patting Ethan proudly on the back. Ethan was the perfect son in his eyes. Played ball like him, drank like him, cursed like him, 2 peas in a pod. While I was the disappointment, the mistake, the girl they hadn't wanted. My father didn't hide it. "This one was a miscalculation," he'd tell his friends, pointing at me. "What can you do? God willed it." The first time things felt truly wrong was on an Easter Sunday when I was about 9. I had on a yellow dress my mother sewed, and the house was full, uncles, cousins, the whole bunch, everyone praising how pretty I looked, saying I was growing into a fine young woman. Normal family stuff. Ethan didn't like it. I saw his expression change, anger, his hand crushing his soda until his knuckles paled. When everybody went outside for the barbecue, he pulled me aside. "Think you're so pretty, huh?" Trying to get attention. I was bewildered. Attention from whom? I'd just been sitting quietly eating cake. He said, "You're mine. You hear? You're mine. I don't want anybody else getting your time." Mine? What did that even mean? Brothers aren't supposed to own sisters. But at that moment something inside him shifted. His look turned possessive and dangerous, and I felt a cold, creeping fear that made my stomach drop. I told my mother, "Mom, Ethan's acting strange with me." She paused with her hands full of suds at the sink, and I saw the moment she knew. I saw understanding flash in her face, and right after it, fear. "It's your imagination, honey," she said, going back to the plates. "Your brother loves you. He's just protective." She scrubbed harder like she hoped to wipe the truth away. And in that instant I realized how alone I was. My father on one side, my mother too frightened to act, and me stuck in the middle. A 9-year-old trying to survive a monster who slept next door. Things escalated. He began coming into the bathroom when I showered. "Forgot your towel," he'd say, and he'd stand there watching. I'd curl into myself, covering where I could, but he wouldn't leave. "What's the matter? I'm your brother. Don't be shy." I learned to bathe fully clothed, went into the bathroom dressed, locked the door, only undressed inside the stall. Even then he managed to get through, breaking the latch, claiming he urgently needed the toilet. My mother would complain the latch was busted. My father accused me of being careless. Nights were the worst. He'd wait until everyone was asleep and come into my room. At first he'd sit on the bed and run his fingers through my hair. "You're beautiful, you know that?" he'd murmur. I faked sleep, squeezed my eyes shut, prayed he'd leave. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. When I turned 11, it all went off the rails. It happened on my birthday. My mother made a simple cake, cornbread with strawberry jam, and we sang happy birthday, just the four of us, no friends, no party. My father handed me some old doll and said, "You're getting too old for this, but here." Ethan gave me a plastic necklace from one of those cheap stores and made a big fuss over it, hugging me in front of everyone. The hug lasted too long and felt too tight. His hand slid down where it shouldn't. I looked at my mother for help, she looked away. That night Ethan came back into my room, and this time he didn't just watch. "You're a young lady now," he whispered. "Time to learn some things." I trembled until the bed shook. I tried to scream, but he clamped a hand over my mouth. "Be quiet. If you shout, I'll tell Dad you've been fooling around with Mark from the grocery store. You know what he'll do." I knew. I'd watched him beat my mother for less. Once she smiled at the gas man and he beat her for a week. Imagine what he'd do if he thought I'd offered myself to the boys in town. So I stayed silent. I bit my pillow and kept quiet while Ethan did things I still struggled to say aloud. It hurt so badly I thought I might die. But the worst part wasn't the physical pain. It was knowing this was happening and nobody would step in. The next day I could barely walk. My mother noticed. "What's wrong, Emily? Why are you limping?" I lied that I'd fallen. She didn't press, but when Ethan wasn't looking she dabbed antiseptic on the bruises, her hands trembling, tears silently falling down her cheeks. From then on it became routine 2 or 3 times a week, maybe more. He'd come when everyone was asleep. I learned to detach. It's amazing how your mind can float away to survive. I'd picture myself flying or a bird free in the sky, anywhere but that bed with that weight on top of me. My father kept thinking Ethan was the pride of the family. The two of them went to the bar together, came back hollering, "This is my son. A real man, not like that dull girl Emily." I was wasting away, eating less, talking less. At school, teachers asked if things were okay. I'd nod and say yes. What could I say? Who would believe me? Ethan was everybody's favorite, helpful to neighbors, polite, playing ball with the kids. No one suspected what he became when the doors shut. There was one day I almost told someone, Mrs. Ruth Adams, the neighbor. She was different, living alone and working outside the home. Folks whispered about her, saying mean things, but she was kind to me. "Emily, honey, you don't seem well," she said once when she found me crying behind the church. I opened my mouth to say the words, "My brother does things," but then I thought of my father and what he was capable of doing, not just to me but to anyone who interfered. So I closed up. "It's nothing, Mrs. Adams, I just fought with a friend." I lied. She didn't press, and years later she came to me and said, "I knew Emily. I knew and I didn't act. Forgive me." I forgave her. What could she have done in that time? Back then those subjects were taboo. Family secrets hidden under a thick blanket of shame. When I was 13 my body began changing, breasts, hips, the whole mess. And then my period came, terrifying because no one ever explained a thing. My mother gave me old rags and said, "You're a young lady now. Be careful." Careful of what? I was already taking every precaution and it didn't matter. Ethan grew worse as my body changed, like I'd become a prize he wanted even more. The visits got more frequent. Sometimes he didn't wait for night, cornering me in the pantry, the bathroom, any dark nook. "You're getting hot," he'd tell me. "Soon the boys will notice. But you're mine." I felt like property, like something stamped and owned, and the worst part was everyone seemed to agree. My father would say, "Ethan'll pick who you marry. He knows the decent boys." He had no idea the only man who'd ever touched me was his son. The breaking point came on a scorching December afternoon. My father had left for work, my mother went to wash clothes at the river, and the house was supposed to be empty, just me, but not really alone. "Come here, Emily. Let's make use of being by ourselves," Ethan said. I tried to run, but he was faster, grabbed my hair and dragged me back to the room. That was the day I fought back. For the first time in all those years I fought. I scratched, bit, and kicked, but he was stronger. "Think you're tough now? I'll teach you a lesson," he snarled. This time the hurt was worse than before. I bled heavily. He looked at the red on the sheets and shrugged. "Clean that up before your mother gets home." I couldn't move. I lay in a pool of blood, wanting nothing more than to vanish. My mother found me like that. Her scream still rings in my ears, a raw sound of horror and guilt. She knew. Of course she knew. "My God, my girl," she said, holding me like when I was a baby. "Forgive your mother. Forgive me." Something inside her shifted that day, either it broke or it fixed. I don't know which, only that she picked me up, bathed me carefully, and bundled our clothes. "We're leaving," she whispered. "Where to, Mom?" I asked. "I don't know, but we have to get out. We never made it." At the door, bags in hand, my father stumbled in, drunker than usual. He took in the scene and everything changed. "What nonsense is this?" he barked. My mother stammered, cried, and pointed to the bruises and blood. He listened, then turned and looked at Ethan standing behind him. "Is this true, son?" he asked. Ethan shrugged and said, "Emily's making things up, Dad. You know how women are, jealous because I've got a girlfriend." My father either believed him or chose not to care. He slapped my mother so hard she fell. "Want to run? Fine. But the girl stays. Someone has to cook and clean." I saw in my mother the exact moment she gave up on me, on herself, on life. She dropped the bag and walked back to the bedroom, and we never spoke of that day again. Life continued. The nightly violations kept happening. My body kept getting used, and my spirit kept shrinking, but something had changed inside me. I wasn't that helpless girl who bit a pillow to stop myself from screaming anymore. I was a survivor. Survivors do what's necessary to keep living, even if inside they've been numb for years. That's the way it is in a house where the monster has the king's protection, where the queen is too weak to shield the princess, where screams are muffled and tears unseen. That's how a girl learns family can also mean living in hell. And the worst was still ahead. The year 1965 began in a way I'd never expected. On New Year's Day I woke feeling queasy, but it wasn't from celebrating because we didn't celebrate. It was a nausea that came from nowhere and sent me running to the toilet. At first I blamed a bad bite of food, but the queasiness kept coming, especially in the mornings. My mother noticed. Mothers notice everything even when they act like they don't. "You eaten something rotten, girl?" she asked. I shook my head. We barely had decent food to begin with. In February I realized my period was late, very late. I wasn't regular anyway, so I didn't think much at first, but when I put the missed months together with the nausea, sore breasts, and an odd craving for pickles with peanut butter, it hit me. No, it couldn't be. But it was. I remember the panic, sitting on the bathroom floor counting months. December missed, January missed, February, halfway through, 3 months. 3 months carrying something inside me. I threw up from sheer terror. 14 years old and pregnant by my own brother. How would I tell anyone? My mother already knew about the abuse and had done nothing. My father would blame me, say I seduced Ethan. What would he do if he heard the truth? So I hid it. I wore the loosest clothes I could scrounge. My father's old shirts, my mother's roomy dresses. I wrapped rags tight around my belly to flatten what was starting to show. But a child's pregnancy won't stay hidden long. My mother noticed first. One morning in March she walked in while I changed and saw my rounded belly and swollen breasts and the stretch marks just starting. Her face drained of color. "Emily, my child, are you?" I broke down and cried like I hadn't in months, real loud crying, not the small quiet sobs I'd learned to hide. "Mom, I didn't want this. I swear I didn't." She hugged me like she hadn't hugged me in years and we wept together on that cold floor. Two women crushed under the same awful weight. "We have to tell your father," she said finally. My blood ran cold. "No, Mom, please. He'll kill me." "What do you want me to do, Emily?" she begged. "Soon it'll be impossible to hide." She was right. At 4 months it would be obvious. At 5 it would be impossible. But fear overruled reason and she said, "Let's wait just a little." Poor thing, she was terrified too. So she began to care for me in secret, saving small scraps of food, brewing herbal teas for the nausea, rubbing oil on my belly to help the skin. Ethan kept coming, oblivious to the changes as men often are when they want to be. He did what he did and left, not noticing that my moans were from pain, not pleasure, because everything hurt worse with a life growing inside me. April came and the panic grew. My belly was getting harder to hide, so I wore a shawl even in the humid Tennessee heat, and told folks at school I had a back problem, so I walked hunched. The teachers pretended to believe. Then on a night in May everything fell apart. My father came home drunker than usual, fought my mother over a cold supper, smashed plates, kicked the dog. Ethan tried to calm him but couldn't this time. He roared, "Where's that Emily?" I was hiding, praying he'd forget I existed. But that day luck was not on my side. He came in. He caught me crouched in the corner, clutching my belly with that old shawl as if it could hide the truth. He took a few slow steps, then froze, his eyes darting from my face to my stomach, back again and then down once more. "Take that rag off," he growled. My hand shook as I loosened the fabric and let it fall. There I stood, my 5-month belly pushing against the thin dress. The silence in the room was heavier than any shout. His face turned red, then purple, his eyes bulging as if they might burst. When he finally spoke, the words came out low and mean. "Whose is it?" I opened my mouth but nothing came out. "Whose is it?" he demanded again. How was I supposed to answer? "I asked you, whose child is this?" "Robert, calm down," my mother tried, stepping between us. Without even looking at her, he struck her hard across the face. "Shut up." Then his glare landed back on me. "I knew it. Always knew you were no good. So who was it? That boy from the grocery? The butcher's helper? How many men?" Each word stabbed deeper than any blade. 14 years old, pregnant by my own brother, and all my father could see was filth in me. "Dad, it wasn't." "Don't you dare call me Dad," he spat. "I ain't the father of a whore." That's when Ethan walked into the room. He took in the scene instantly, but instead of shame or guilt, his face twisted in anger. "What's happening?" he asked. "Your sister," my father barked, pointing at me as though I were vermin. "She's pregnant." Ethan's eyes met mine. For a split second he knew I was about to speak, and he decided to get ahead of it. "I knew it," he said smoothly. "I saw her with Mark from the gas station plenty of times. I tried to warn you but you wouldn't listen." Mark, the boy barely 16 who never even looked at me that way. But just hearing his name sent my father into a frenzy. "That son of a... I'll kill him." He stormed out, staggering from drink but fueled by rage. Ethan followed, not to stop him but to make sure the lie stuck. I was left alone with my mother. She looked at me with pity and despair tangled in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell him the truth?" she asked softly. "Would it have mattered?" I said, too drained for tears. "Do you think he'd have believed me?" She had no answer. We both knew. What followed was an even deeper circle of hell. My father went after Mark, made a public scene so loud it echoed across town. Mark's family swore he'd never touched me, and they were right. But my father had already poisoned everyone's ears with his lies. Within 2 weeks, Mark's family packed up and fled. Unable to endure the shame, the threats, the gossip. An innocent boy paid for my brother's crime. And me? I was stamped forever as the disgrace of the Harpers. The daughter who ruined the family's name. My father wouldn't even look at me anymore. My mother tended to me in secret, but always with the weary look of someone bearing a cross too heavy to carry. As for Ethan, he was hailed as the hero, the brother who tried to protect the family's honor, the one who had warned about my wayward behavior. It made me sick. At night he still came sometimes. Not as often. He said I was damaged goods now, but he still came. And when he did, he'd lean close and whisper, "This baby is mine. Don't ever forget that." The summer dragged by. June crawled, July was worse. My belly swelled, the baby kicked, and inside I kept shrinking. I stopped going to school, my father forbade it. "I won't be humiliated by you anymore," he said. So I was locked inside the house, carrying another prison inside my own body. The only times I was allowed out were for church. My father insisted on it, wanted everyone to see my shame. The church women would point, whisper, shake their heads. I'd sit in the last pew with my shawl stretched over my enormous belly and pray. Not for forgiveness, I hadn't sinned, but for strength, for escape, for a miracle. By August, 8 months along, I could hardly move. My feet were swollen, my back ached. The baby felt like a stone dragging me down. My mother, who worked as a midwife when she wasn't breaking her back with laundry or dodging Robert's fists, prepared me for what was coming. "It's going to be hard," she warned. "You're so young, too small. But we'll get through it." As if she could shoulder some of the pain for me. As if she could help me carry the unbearable truth that I was about to deliver my brother's child. My own nephew. It was at dawn one September morning when the labor began. A sharp pain in my back, then a stronger one in my belly, followed by warm liquid down my legs. My water had broken. I whispered for my mother and she came running. "It's time." The hours that followed were blurred with agony. I bit down on a rag to keep from screaming, desperate not to wake the men. My mother boiled water, laid out rags, murmured encouragement. "Stay strong, honey. Breathe. That's it." But it dragged on and on. The baby was turned wrong, wouldn't budge. Her hands worked frantically, trying to coax him into position. "Holy Mary, help my girl," she prayed through tears. 16 hours of labor, 16 years it felt like. By the time he was ready to come, I had no strength left. "One more push, Emily," my mother urged. "Just one more." And through one last burst of searing pain, my son entered the world. A small boy but perfect. Dark hair, pale skin. When his eyes fluttered open, they were green. Green like Ethan's. My mother cut the cord, washed him, swaddled him. When she placed him against my chest, I felt something I hadn't expected: love. Pure, raw, endless love. That tiny soul wasn't guilty of a thing. He was innocent. He deserved the world's protection. "What will you name him?" my mother asked. Before I could speak, the door creaked open. Robert came in, Ethan right behind him. They saw the baby, saw me pale and broken on the bed. "It's a boy," my father announced flatly. For a fleeting moment, pride crossed his face. Then it vanished. "Doesn't matter. A son's a son." Ethan stepped closer, his eyes on the baby. He noticed the green eyes, the square jaw already taking shape. A smile tugged at his lips. "The kid's handsome," he said. For a brief instant I thought I saw remorse. But no, it was possession. Twisted pride. That child was living proof of his hold over me. "He'll be called Charles," my father declared. "Charles Harper. Proper name for a man. Maybe he won't take after his mother." And just like that, my boy had a name, Charles. In the days that followed, the house turned strange. Robert acted as if the baby didn't exist. Grace cared for both of us as best she could. And Ethan, he circled us like a wolf. He'd watch Charles nurse, sleep, fuss. Sometimes he'd try to hold him, but my whole body seized up whenever he reached out. "He's my son too," he murmured once when we were alone. "No," I snapped, gathering all the steel I had. "He's mine. Only mine." But deep down I knew nothing in that house truly belonged to me. Not my body, not my child, not even my life. My milk came in slowly. Charles cried with hunger and I cried with despair. My mother brewed teas, massaged me, but it wasn't enough. Then Ruth Adams, our neighbor, appeared with a can of formula. Said it was leftovers from her grandkids, though I knew she'd bought it. She offered it in a way Robert couldn't refuse without seeming heartless. "Take it, Robert," she said firmly. "The baby isn't guilty of anything." So Charles survived on Ruth's quiet mercy. Formula: clothes that appeared mysteriously at the door, a blanket, a pacifier here and there. The town knew. Everyone knew. A few good souls tried to help, but inside that house things only got worse. Robert drank more, hit more. Grace grew thinner, more fragile. And Ethan started talking about the future. When the kid grows, he'll be just like me, he'd say. I'll show him everything. He'll be my partner, my blood. The terror of hearing that was worse than all the nights of abuse. I swore then and there, before I let him shape my son into another monster, I'd die first. That's when I began plotting an escape. 15 years old, a baby in my arms, no money, no plan, but I had to try. For Charles. For his chance at something better. The question was how to break free from a cage when the jailer slept in the next room. I held on to that thought night and day. By December, Charles was 3 months old, drinking from the bottle, sleeping longer. I decided it was time. Robert had gone to work, Ethan to basketball, and Grace was in the yard with laundry. I wrapped Charles in a blanket, tucked in his few clothes and a can of formula inside a grocery bag. I didn't even own a suitcase. I crept to the gate, heart pounding like it would burst. 1 step onto the sidewalk. 2, 3. Then I heard it. Where do you think you're going? Robert. He hadn't gone to work, he'd been waiting, watching. I turned slowly, clutching Charles tight. I was just taking him out for some air. The slap came before I finished. I hit the ground hard, curling over my baby to shield him. You thought you'd run with the bastard, he roared. He yanked me up by my hair, dragged me back inside, and locked the door behind us. From that moment on, I was a prisoner. I couldn't even step into the yard without someone watching. January of 1966 was blistering hot, the air thick like punishment. Charles was growing, his face more like Ethan's every day. The same green eyes, the same sharp jaw. He was both my greatest blessing and my deepest curse. I adored him more than my own life, but every familiar feature reminded me of the nightmare that created him. Ethan took more interest in the baby as time went on. Wanted to hold him, play with him, make silly faces. I resisted whenever I could, but not always. Robert encouraged it. Let his uncle help. A boy needs a man around. If only he knew what kind of man Ethan was. One afternoon I overheard Ethan boasting to a friend. When the kid grows, he'll be my buddy. I'll teach him women, liquor, all of it. He'll be a real man, not soft like when women raise them. My stomach turned cold. He wasn't just talking about fishing or ball games. He was planning to turn my boy into another predator. No, never. I'd die first. So I tried again. It was a February night. I waited until the whole house slept. This time I thought I was clever. I grabbed a kitchen knife, forced open the window slowly. I passed Charles out first, then squeezed myself through. We were nearly free, nearly on the street, when the neighbor's dog barked loud enough to wake the whole block. Lights flicked on. People stirred. Robert stumbled out in his underwear, enraged. Get her. I ran barefoot through the dark, clutching Charles, heart pounding like a drum. But where could I go? I had no one. No family but the ones I was running from. The streets twisted into sameness, the baby wailing, me sobbing, desperation choking me. I ducked behind the church and crouched there, praying for sunrise, for some miracle. But no miracle came. Robert arrived with Ethan and 2 men. It didn't take long. Small towns don't leave many places to hide. The beating I got that night nearly ended me. He pounded me until the world went black. I woke 2 days later, swollen and bruised, my eyes barely able to open. Next time I'll kill you, Robert warned. And the bastard too. And I believed him. Every word dripped with real hatred. So I stopped trying. March came, April followed, and I lived like a ghost in my own body. I cared for Charles, scrubbed floors, cooked meals, endured the fists when I slipped. Ethan still came some nights. Not as much, but enough. You're still mine, he'd hiss. No matter how many kids you have. Kids plural. The thought of being pregnant again was a terror that haunted me more than death. But what could I do? Locks didn't stop him. Screams only brought worse beatings. Fighting back was impossible, he was stronger, always stronger. It was in May when I met Rosie, a girl my age who just started coming to church. Her family had moved down from New York after her father got transferred with the bank. She didn't fit the mold of anyone in town, wore pants without apology, cursed when she felt like it, smoked in secret. At first she startled me, but then I couldn't help being drawn to her. Rosie was everything I wanted to be. Bold, free, unafraid of herself. We started talking after Mass. She didn't stare at me like the others, didn't whisper about me behind her hand. "How old's your boy?" she asked one day. 8 months, I answered. "And his father?" "There is no father." Rosie gave me a look only another woman could understand. "There's always a father," she said quietly. "The question is whether he's worth speaking of." I stayed silent, but I think she saw the truth in my eyes. After that, she began stopping by my house with little excuses. Borrowing a book, asking about a recipe. My father hated her, muttered that she wasn't a decent girl. But Grace defended her visits, said it was good for me to have company. What nobody knew was that Rosie and I were plotting together. She had connections back in New York, safe houses for girls like me, places where single mothers could disappear where nobody asked too many questions. "But you'll need money for the ticket," she told me. "And enough to keep you fed until you can work." Money. Always money. Where was I supposed to get it, locked away the way I was? The answer came from where I least expected. June rolled in with the town's 4th of July preparations. Fireworks, parades, barbecues. My father, obsessed with appearances, declared that our family would take part. He forced me into a gingham dress, tied a ribbon in my hair. I carried Charles stuffed into a tiny patriotic outfit. At the celebration, while Robert got drunk with his friends and Ethan strutted around with girls, I slipped away for a moment of quiet. I sat on a bench rocking Charles, who was fussy with all the noise. That's when she appeared, Laura Wilson, the mayor's wife. Everyone knew her story. Elegant, wealthy, childless, aching for babies she could never have. She leaned toward me with a pleading smile. "May I hold him for a while?" I hesitated, then nodded. She cradled Charles so tenderly, as if he were made of glass. To my surprise, he didn't cry, he relaxed, even smiled. "He's beautiful," she whispered. "So very beautiful." We sat in silence, her rocking my boy, me lost in my thoughts. Then she spoke, voice soft but steady. "It must be hard. So young, so alone." "It is," I admitted, too weary to lie. "If you need help with anything." I looked into her eyes and saw something I hadn't seen in a long time, true kindness, not the shallow pity of church ladies. "Are you serious?" I asked. "Very serious," she said. That was the start. Mrs. Wilson began helping me in secret. Clothes for Charles, little sums of money, care packages passed discreetly through others so Robert wouldn't suspect. He assumed it came from the church and didn't ask. Each coin, each bill I tucked away, inside the mattress lining, hidden among diapers, anywhere safe. Penny by penny my escape fund grew. July passed in a blur. Charles was crawling, babbling, his first words spilling out. "Mama!" I cried harder than I thought possible. It was proof. I wasn't just a girl who gave birth. I was his mother. But August brought another blow. One night, while I was quietly packing a bag, Ethan caught me. "Going on a trip, sis?" he smirked. "Charles has a fever," I stammered. "I was going to take him to the clinic." "Liar." He stepped closer, pinning me to the wall. His hand closed around my throat. Not tight enough to kill, just enough to remind me that he could. "You try running again, it won't be Dad who kills you. It'll be me. And the bastard too. But don't worry, we can always make another." The threat against Charles broke me. I could take anything but not that. I put the bag away, buried the plan for the moment. September came with Charles's first birthday. I baked a small cake with the bit of flour I had. We sang softly. He clapped, smeared frosting across his face. And for one precious moment it was just us. Mother and son celebrating life. But reality crashed back quickly. That night, Ethan stumbled into my room, reeking of whiskey. He stared at Charles asleep in the crib. "It's been a year today," he slurred. "A year since my boy was born." "He's not your son," I hissed. Ethan laughed. An ugly, humorless laugh. "Look at him. The eyes, the jaw. He's me through and through. Get out of my room." "Your room?" He sneered. "Nothing here is yours. Not this room, not the sun. You're mine. Always mine." He grabbed me and I fought, but he was stronger, drunk, violent. The struggle woke Charles, who began to cry. "Shut him up," Ethan barked. I tore free and rushed to the crib, rocking Charles desperately. Behind me, Ethan swayed, smiling. "Good to see you together. Mother and son. My family. Our family." Nausea rose in my throat. I clutched Charles tight, as if I could shield him with my body. "One day," Ethan whispered, voice thick with drink, "one day I'll tell him. I'll tell him who his real father is. Then we'll be a real family." That was the final straw. Right then, with my baby in my arms and that monster breathing behind me, I made a vow. I was going to run. Even if it killed me, I was going to get Charles out. I didn't know the opportunity would come so soon, in the most tragic way imaginable. October began strangely. Robert seemed quieter, drinking less. At first I thought I was imagining it, but Grace noticed too. "Robert's acting odd," she said while scrubbing dishes. "No appetite. Looks tired." It was true. The man who'd always seemed like a bull was shrinking, skin yellowing, eyes sinking. But in our house, showing concern was weakness. No one dared speak it aloud. Then one morning the screaming started. I ran into their room with Charles in my arms. Robert was thrashing on the floor, foam spilling from his mouth, body stiff and convulsing. Grace knelt beside him, panicked. "Call for help," she screamed. Ethan rushed in, eyes wide with a fear I'd never seen on him before. He bolted for the pharmacist, the closest thing to a doctor we had. But it was too late. By the time Mr. Thompson arrived, Robert was still silent, gone. "A massive heart attack," he said. "Nothing to be done." Just like that, dead. The man who had terrorized me my whole life, lying there in pajamas and slippers. I thought I should feel something, grief, relief, anything, but all I felt was emptiness. A heavy weight had lifted, and I didn't know how to stand without it. The wake was held that afternoon. Small towns don't wait. The house filled with relatives I'd never seen, drinking buddies, co-workers. They all spoke as though Robert had been a good man. Strict but fair. A family provider. Lies everyone preferred to believe. Ethan stepped into his father's shoes without hesitation. He accepted condolences, made arrangements, strutted with the pride of being the man of the house. At the cemetery, as the coffin was lowered, it hit me. Robert's death meant one thing. A chance. The man who had watched me, caged me, threatened me into submission was gone. Across the grave, Ethan's eyes found mine, and he gave me a small, private smile. It said everything. "Now I'm in charge. Now you're even more mine." But he didn't know that in that very moment, as the dirt covered Robert's coffin, I was planning freedom. My freedom. Charles's freedom. His death wasn't a tragedy to me. It was the miracle I had begged for. The first days after were chaos. People coming and going, food dropped off. Condolences repeated until they were meaningless. Grace wandered the house hollow-eyed, unsure how to live without someone dictating her every move. Ethan puffed his chest, signing papers, playing head of the family. I wasn't wasting time. While they wrestled with death's paperwork, I was planning life. Rosie came by on the third day, her usual bold self. "So," she said bluntly, "you going to take this chance?" I looked at Charles, 14 months old, toddling on shaky legs, babbling sweet nonsense. "My perfect boy." "I am," I told her. "But I need to be smart." "When?" she pressed. "Soon. Before he takes it all." The plan was simple. Wait for the will, claim my share, and vanish. Rosie had already lined up a cousin in New York who rented rooms to young women. Not perfect, but a start. But when the lawyer read the will, my hope cracked. Robert had left everything, house, land, savings, to his son. To Ethan. For me and Grace, only the right to live there, at Ethan's mercy. "That isn't fair," Grace blurted, finding her voice for once. "The law allows it," the lawyer said with a shrug. I saw the triumph on Ethan's face. It was official now, he owned everything. Including me. That night, despair swallowed me whole. Without money, how could I run? Tickets were expensive. Charles needed formula, clothes, food. Where could we go? Then I remembered Laura Wilson. Her promise. The next day I pretended I needed medicine for Charles. Grace let me go. She was too lost in her widowhood to argue. I hurried to the mayor's mansion, nerves rattling with every step. What if she refused? What if she regretted helping? But she welcomed me with her warm smile. Emily, what a surprise. I heard about your father. My condolences. Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. I need to talk to you. She must have seen the desperation on my face because she ushered me inside at once. In her lavish parlor, with Charles wide-eyed at the glittering crystal, I told her everything. Not all the ugly details, I couldn't, but enough. That I had to leave, that my son's future depended on it. She listened quietly, then sighed. I suspected as much. In a town this small, one always suspects. But I never knew how to help. Now you can, I whispered. Please. I just need money for a ticket. She fell into thought, and after a long silence she spoke. I can do better than that. I have a friend in Washington, D.C. She runs a family boarding house. Needs help in the kitchen. Offers room and board. It isn't much, but it's safe. Washington. The capital. Far from Oak Ridge. Far from Ethan. My heart soared. I'll take it, I said. I'll take anything. I'll call her today, she promised. And the ticket? Consider it a gift. Tears stung my eyes. But she wasn't finished. One condition, Emily. When you leave, you don't come back. You don't write, don't send word. For your safety and mine. My husband can't know I helped you. Do you understand? I do, I said. And I meant it. I walked out of that mansion lighter than I'd felt in years. I had a plan. I had help. I had hope. The following days were filled with secret preparation. I packed only the essentials, clothes for Charles, documents, the small stash of money I'd hidden. Our whole lives stuffed into a single bag. Rosie helped however she could. Checking bus schedules, explaining routes, teaching me how to use a payphone, reminding me to be cautious in the big city. November 3, 1966, was the chosen date. The bus left at 4 in the morning. Mrs. Wilson sent the ticket money with Rosie, along with a letter of recommendation for her friend. The night before I barely slept. I watched Charles, memorizing every inch of him. His soft hair, his little nose, his plump fingers. My son, my light. He would finally see a world bigger than those four walls. At 3 a.m., I dressed him quietly, still half asleep, tucked him against me, grabbed our bag, crossed myself and crept through the house. The place was silent. Grace snored softly in her room. Ethan was gone. It was Friday, his night at the brothel. I tiptoed through the living room. Every creak of the floorboards thundered in my ears. Charles stirred in my arms, mumbling in his sleep. I gently hushed him, swaying side to side as I moved closer to the front door. My hand was on the knob when I heard a voice. Really leaving? I froze. Slowly I turned. Grace stood in the kitchen doorway, hair messy, old nightgown hanging off her shoulders, her eyes red from hours of crying. Mom! I whispered. I know, she said. I've always known. I just never had the courage. Her voice cracked, fragile. Your father. I was afraid. The words slipped out of me before I could stop them, words years in the making. Why didn't you protect me? Her shoulders slumped, her gaze falling to the floor. Because I'm weak. Always have been. But you're not. You're strong, Emily. Stronger than I'll ever be. We stood there in the dark, mother and daughter, two women tied by blood but split by fate. Finally she whispered, Go. Don't look back. Take care of that boy. Give him the life you deserve. I walked over and pressed a kiss to her cheek. Her skin smelled of soap and salt from her tears. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, my daughter. I stepped outside without turning back. The dawn air was sharp and cold, cutting through me, but Charles snuggled closer against my chest and drifted back to sleep. I hurried down the empty streets, every step pulling me farther from that house, that life, that nightmare. The bus station was dim, small, almost forgotten. Rosie was waiting like she'd promised she would be. I thought you weren't coming, she said, relief in her eyes. I almost didn't. My mother, she knows. She's always known. Rosie only nodded. Between women, some things never needed to be said. The bus pulled in, belching black smoke. The driver, a pot-bellied old man, barely looked at me as he took the ticket. Washington, huh? Long trip. 18 hours if the bus doesn't give out. 18 hours. Almost a full day carrying me farther from hell, closer to something unknown. But anything was better than staying. I struggled up the steps, balancing Charles and the bag. The bus was nearly empty. Just a few scattered passengers dozing. I found a seat in the back by the window and settled Charles on my lap. His little eyes were wide, curious about everything. Rosie climbed in just long enough to squeeze my hand. Take care of him. And yourself. I will. When you get there, forget this place. Forget everything. Start over. Like it's that simple, I said softly. It's not simple, she told me. But it's necessary. You deserve happiness, Emily. Both of you do. The driver honked. Time to go. Rosie slipped off the bus and stood on the sidewalk, waving as we pulled away. I waved back, my eyes burning with tears I refused to let fall. Through the window, Oakridge faded. The little houses, the church where I'd suffered in silence, the cemetery where my father lay, the square where I never got to play. Each building shrank until they were swallowed by the night. Charles pointed at the lights flying past the glass. Look, Mama, look. Yes, baby. We're going far, far away. He clapped his tiny hands, giggling at the adventure, too small to understand the prison we'd escaped, or the monster who would wake in a few hours to discover we were gone. I pictured Ethan's face when he found my room empty. The fury. The hate. But then the relief too. One less mouth to feed. No sister's bastard to account for. He'd be livid at first, but men like him always found new prey. Oakridge had plenty of weak fathers, passive mothers, and vulnerable girls. But I was no longer one of them. The road stretched ahead, an endless ribbon of blacktop. The first glow of sunrise painted the horizon in pink and orange. Charles drifted off, his hand clutching my blouse, his breath soft against me. 18 hours. Just 18 hours to shed Emily Harper of Oakridge and step into the skin of someone new. Someone without a past. Someone without fear. I leaned against the glass, watching the scenery shift. Fields, small towns, lonely gas stations. The South rolled by, huge and full of possibilities. In Washington, no one knew my name. I could reinvent myself. War widow, small town girl, single mother. It didn't matter. Anything but the truth. The truth would stay buried back home, along with my innocence, along with Robert Harper, along with the girl I used to be. Charles stirred and whimpered. I nursed him quietly. At his age, it was more comfort than food. But his green eyes looked at me with total trust. Green like his father's. But that no longer mattered. They were just the beautiful eyes of my son, a boy who would grow up free. The hours passed. The bus swayed. The engine droned. We made brief stops in nameless towns. Strangers came and went, brushing past our lives. At one stop I slipped off to use the bathroom. A kind woman offered to hold Charles, but I shook my head. Thank you, but he comes with me. Never again would I leave him in someone else's arms. Never again would I hand over my trust so easily. Back on the bus, I ate the simple lunch Rosie had packed. A sandwich, a banana, a little bottle of water. Tasted like freedom. The day slid into night. Charles slept most of the trip, waking only to nurse or fuss when the bus jolted. I couldn't sleep. Every mile was a victory. Every town we passed was one more chain broken. At last, near midnight, the driver called out, "Next stop, Washington, D.C. Bus station. Get your belongings ready." Washington. We'd made it. I peered out the window at the blazing lights of the city. Wide boulevards, tall blocks of buildings, cars streaming in every direction. It was a world I didn't recognize, and my chest swelled with a mix of terror and excitement. The bus rolled to a stop. My legs trembled as I stepped down. Charles stirring awake, startled by the noise and light. It's all right, my love. We're here. The station was massive compared to Oakridge. Buses hissing, vendors shouting, crowds pushing past. I felt small but in the best way. Invisible. Perfect. I found a payphone and dialed the number Mrs. Wilson had given me. Good Hope Boarding House, a woman's voice answered. Hello, is this Mrs. Martha? Mrs. Wilson sent me. Emily Harper. Yes, I was expecting you, she said warmly. Come, dear. Take a taxi. Give the driver this address. A taxi. I'd never ridden one in my life, but I figured it out. The driver, a kind man in his 40s, helped with my bag. First time in Washington? He asked. Yes, I said softly. You'll like it here. Plenty of opportunity. Opportunity. That was all I needed. The boarding house sat in a quiet neighborhood. A modest but tidy building. Mrs. Martha was waiting at the door, apron tied at her waist, gray hair pinned back. "You must be tired. Come in, I've prepared a room." It was small, but to me it looked like luxury. A bed, a dresser, even a makeshift crib for Charles. "The kitchen's on the ground floor," she explained. "You'll start tomorrow. 3 meals a day for the guests, pay is weekly, room and board included." I nodded, ready for anything. That first night, lying in the strange bed with Charles breathing peacefully beside me, I cried, tears of relief, of fear, of hope, for all I had endured, for everything still ahead. Washington was a city of promises. Nobody here knew me. Nobody knew what I carried. I could be anyone. That night I chose a new name for myself. Emily Smith. A plain, unremarkable widow whose husband had died in a work accident. Just one more migrant among thousands chasing a better life. And in a way it was true. I was chasing one. The past stayed buried in Oakridge. The future began here, in this tiny room, in this enormous city, with my son in my arms and freedom finally close enough to touch. The months that followed at the boarding house were hard, but they were the right kind of hard. I woke at dawn, left Charles with Mrs. Martha, and worked in the kitchen. Breakfast for 15 guests, toast, eggs, coffee. Then clean up, then lunch, then dinner. In between I ran upstairs to nurse Charles, change him, hold him. Exhausting, sweaty, endless, but it was mine. Nobody touched me. Nobody threatened me. Nobody called me names. I was simply Emily the cook. The quiet, hard-working girl. Charles thrived. At a year and a half he ran through the halls with squeals of laughter. The guests adored him. Mrs. Martha melted whenever he wrapped his arms around her neck. Even the chambermaids squabbled over who got to play with him. For the first time my boy had a family. A strange patchwork family, but a family all the same. 1967 flew by, and I saved every penny. My dream was simple. Leave the boarding house, rent a place of our own, no matter how small. A place where I could raise Charles free of curious stares and questions I didn't want to answer. Then in 1968, life shifted again. A new guest arrived. His name was Robert, a retired civil servant, recently widowed. He was around 60, soft-spoken, educated. He came for weeks at a time, left, then returned. It was impossible not to notice Charles, now 2 years old, bright, talkative, his green eyes catching everyone's attention. Robert began bringing small gifts. A toy car, a book. I thanked him politely but kept my guard up. Men who seemed too kind always made me wary. But Robert never crossed lines. He just told stories, played with Charles, talked about his late wife, about children who lived far away, about the loneliness that clung to him. "You remind me of my daughter," he said once. Same strength. Same determination. One afternoon, Charles scraped his knee badly while playing. He sobbed uncontrollably until Robert appeared with a first aid kit. "I used to be an army medic," he explained, carefully cleaning the wound. He hummed a silly tune, distracting Charles until the crying stopped. Watching him, something shifted in me. He wasn't dangerous. He was a grandfather. Another soul who needed family as much as we did. Our friendship grew slow and steady. Sometimes he joined me in the kitchen, peeling potatoes while he told me about the Kennedy years, about the civil rights marches, about the hope for a better America. I listened. I learned. I dreamed. Then one day he surprised me with an offer. "Emily, I have a house in Georgetown. It's been empty since my wife passed. Too big for me alone. How about you and Charles come live there? You'd look after the house, cook for me, and I'd pay you a fair wage." My heart skipped. A house? Our own space? Sounded impossible. "But what will people say?" I asked. He chuckled. "Let them talk. I'm too old to care. You need a home. I need company. This isn't romance, it's business." I thought long and hard. I sat down with Mrs. Martha and asked her opinion. She didn't hesitate. "Robert's a good man, Emily. I've never once seen him treat anyone badly." That was all I needed to hear. I said yes. By March of 1969, Charles and I moved into Robert's townhouse. It wasn't fancy, but it was roomy and neat, 3 bedrooms, a little yard. For the first time in his life, my boy had a room all to himself. Life settled into a rhythm. I managed the house, cooked meals, kept things in order. Robert left early in the mornings and came back late afternoons. We'd share dinner, talk about the day, then go our separate ways. Respectful, peaceful, healthy distance. But children don't care about lines drawn between adults. Charles instantly claimed Robert as his grandfather. He called him Grandpa Rob and followed him everywhere, showing off drawings, begging for stories, asking 100 questions. And Robert, God bless him, melted. He was the one who taught Charles to ride a bike, who took him to the park, who pointed up at the sky and said, "Look there, Charlie, that big one's a Boeing." Watching the two of them together made my heart ache. That was what family was supposed to look like. Care without hidden motives. Love without poison. Everything I never had as a child, my son was now experiencing. By 1970, things changed. Robert's heart began giving him trouble. I became his nurse, handing him pills at the right times, cooking low-salt meals, forcing him to rest. He'd grumble, but he listened. "You're worse than a drill sergeant," he'd joke. "It's for your own good," I'd scold. "I know," he'd sigh. "That's why I put up with it." One night after a scare at the hospital, he took my hand. "Emily, I need to ask something. If anything happens to me, don't talk like that. Listen, if it happens, I want you to keep the house. You and Charles. I've already handled the papers." I argued. It was too much. I couldn't accept something like that. But he insisted. "I've got no one. My kids barely call. You and Charles are my family now. Let me take care of you the way you've taken care of me." I cried. For the first time in years, I really cried. Not for the house, not for the money, but because someone saw me as a human being worth protecting. Not as an object. Not as a burden. Robert pulled through, but he grew weaker. I started sleeping in the room next to his so I could hear if he needed help. Charles floated between us, sleeping in my bed when he was scared, in Robert's room when he wanted another story. In 1971, I enrolled Charles in kindergarten. He was 5 years old, sharp as a tack, dressed in his little blue uniform with a gap-toothed smile. My pride. My miracle. "Mom," he asked one day out of nowhere, "why don't I have a dad?" My chest clenched. I'd known the question would come, but I still wasn't ready. "Your dad died, sweetheart, when you were a baby." "How did he die?" "An accident. At work." "Was he nice?" I swallowed hard. Yes, he was nice. A lie. But some lies protect. Some truths destroy. For now he believed me. But I knew one day I'd have to build more details. An invented past for an invented man. Anything but the real story. In 1972, the whole country was glued to the presidential election. Robert bought a brand new color TV. A luxury for us. We watched every broadcast together, me, him, Charles, neighbors who came by. When Nixon won again, Charles painted his face red, white, and blue and ran in the street with the other kids. Watching him laughing free, I thought about Oak Ridge. Did it still exist? Was Ethan still there? Was my mother alive? I forced the thoughts away. That life was dead. I was Emily Smith now, cook and single mother, Washington resident. The past didn't exist. Still at night the past crept in. In my dreams Ethan found me. He ripped Charles away from me. Everything started again. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, run to check on Charles, and only calm when I saw him sleeping safe. By 1973, Charles turned 7. Robert threw him a party, cake, balloons, kids running everywhere. I snapped photos with the camera Robert had gifted me. Frozen pieces of happiness I never thought we'd have. Something shifted between Robert and me that year. Not romance, we didn't want that. It was deeper. True family, built from daily kindness and respect. But by winter, Robert's health took a sharp turn. He was in and out of the hospital constantly. I split my life between caring for him and raising Charles. Neighbors pitched in. Teachers understood. For the first time, I had a support system. One night in the hospital, Robert was too weak to speak loudly. He whispered, "Emily, you were the daughter I always wished for. And Charles, the grandson I never got to meet. Thank you." "Thank you," I said, gripping his hand. "For everything." He passed in September. Peaceful. In his sleep. Exactly as he deserved. The funeral was small. His children showed up, 2 cold men in pressed suits. They eyed me like I was a fraud. "Who are you?" What were you doing here? Why did our father leave the house to you? I was his housekeeper, I explained simply. A housekeeper who inherits everything? The meaning in their sneers was clear. They thought I was a gold digger. A fraud. I let them talk. I owed them nothing. The lawyer confirmed everything. The will was solid. Robert had made sure of it. The house was legally mine and Charles's. The sons stormed off, threatening lawsuits, but they never returned. 1974 began with something new. For the first time in my life I had security. A home. Stability. Charles was thriving in school. I picked up work at a nearby diner, determined to keep earning, to stand on my own 2 feet. But nights were hard. The house felt too big. Too empty. Charles missed his grandpa Rob. I missed his quiet company. That's when I met Mrs. Neely, my neighbor. A tough New Orleans woman, respected as a voodoo priestess. She had eyes that saw right through me. Girl, you're carrying something heavy. Want to talk? At first I brushed her off. But one sleepless night I knocked on her door. We sat over coffee while I let pieces of the story slip. Not all of it, never all, but enough about the loneliness, the nightmares. She listened. She understood. We all got ghosts, child. The trick is making sure they don't run our lives. She became family. She babysat Charles when I worked late. I helped with her gatherings. For the first time I felt community. Belonging. Charles soaked up her stories, saints, legends, myths. He grew into a boy who respected culture and difference. This one will go far, she told me. He's got his own light. God, I hope she was right. By 1975, Charles was 9, curious and full of questions. The ones about his father came back, sharper this time. What kind of work did he do? Construction. He helped build Washington. Why don't we have photos of him? We lost them when we moved. How did you two meet? Each answer was another lie, another brick in the wall I was building around him. A wall to keep the truth out. A night I started writing. Bent over a notebook, pouring out Oak Ridge, Ethan, the basement, the escape. Crooked letters on hidden pages. Not to publish. Just to remember. To keep myself from ever forgetting, even when I wanted to. Maybe one day someone would find it after I was gone. But not Charles. Never him. 1976, my boy hit adolescence. His voice cracked, his face broke out, and girls suddenly mattered. He was normal. Healthy. Thank God. But his eyes, those damn green eyes. Every year they looked more like Ethan's. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of him in Charles's expression and my heart would stop. But I'd remind myself, blood doesn't decide character. My son was good. He would be good. In 1977, Charles graduated middle school. There he was in a suit, diploma in hand, grinning ear to ear. I cried quietly in the audience. My little boy was becoming a man. A good man. The years flew by. By 1978, Charles was preparing for college. Mom, I want to be an engineer, like Dad. Like the ghost I had invented for him. The father who never existed. You will, son. You'll reach every dream, I told him. His dreams mine, and those of the made-up man I'd created to protect him. The day Georgetown accepted him for civil engineering, we threw a block party. Neighbors came. Mrs. Neely cooked jambalaya. Charles lifted me in his arms, laughing. We did it, Mom. We made it. And he was right. Against all odds, we had made it. College was expensive. Nobody warned me how much. Books, materials, bus fare, it all added up. I worked 2 jobs again, diner by day, cleaning by night. Exhausting, but worth it. By 1979, Charles was steady with a girl from his class, Claudia. Sweet, serious, from a good family. He introduced her one evening. Mom, this is the love of my life. He was only 19, but I believed him. In 1980, he graduated. My son an engineer. I nearly burst with pride watching him walk across that stage, searching the crowd for my face. In 1981, he married Claudia. Church bells, veil and flowers. I stood as his only family. When people asked about my relatives, I said they were gone. Dead. Another half-truth. Dead to me at least. Watching Charles and Claudia vow to each other, I thought about Oak Ridge, the nightmare marriage I'd barely escaped, and marveled at the difference. This was love. This was choice. In 1982, my first grandchild arrived. A girl. Mary Claire. Perfect, innocent. When I held her, I felt like life had finally come full circle. Someone said she looked like me. I prayed she didn't. No green eyes. Thank God. In 1984 came John Robert, named after Grandpa Rob. Charles and Claudia built a home of their own. Their life steady, joyful. I often looked around the table at family dinners. Kids laughing, adults talking. And felt like I was living someone else's dream. Nobody there knew. Nobody would ever know. And that's how it had to stay. By 1985, Charles launched his own firm. Mom, you've worked enough. Let me take care of you now. I resisted, but Claudia backed him up. I finally retired. Became a full-time grandma, school pickups, carrot cake, bedtime stories. Stories I made up. Happy ones. Stories without monsters and basements. In 1986, we moved into a bigger house. Charles wanted me with them. You're the head of the family, Mom. Your place is here. My place. After a lifetime of having none, I finally belonged. But the past never stays buried. One sleepless night, I turned on the TV. A news report flashed. Oak Ridge modernizes infrastructure. There it was. My hometown. Still standing. Changed, but there. My stomach turned. I shut it off. Some doors are better left closed. Now here I am. 73 years old. Time slipped by while I was busy living instead of just surviving. Charles is a grandfather himself now, gray hair, same sweet smile. Mary Claire's a doctor. John Robert's an engineer like his father. Alice is a teenager dreaming of being a writer. Great-grandma. Have you ever thought of writing your memoirs? Alice asked me the other day. I almost choked on my coffee. What memoirs, sweetheart? Grandma hasn't lived anything exciting. Lie number 1001. But some stories aren't meant to be told. They're meant to stay buried so new generations can write theirs free of stains. Still, last night I dreamed of Oak Ridge for the first time in decades. But it wasn't a nightmare. I dreamed of the town burning to ash, wind sweeping everything away. I woke lighter. Now, sitting here recording this video for the Grandparents' Tales channel, I'm telling it for the first and last time. Why now? Maybe because time's short. Maybe because other women need to hear it. Maybe because secrets grow heavy and I'm tired. If you've listened this far, thank you. I know it's hard, but it had to be said. There are so many Emilis out there trapped hopeless, but there is a way out. A door. A window. Sometimes a hole you have to dig yourself. But there's always a way. The miracle wasn't the ticket money. It wasn't Robert's will. It wasn't even my father's death. The miracle was me realizing I deserved better, and finding the courage to take it. Charles doesn't know this story. He never will. People say children deserve to know where they came from. I say children deserve peace. They deserve to believe their father was a hero, not a monster. That's the last gift I can give him. Carrying this truth with me to the grave. These green eyes I once hated? Now I see them as proof. Proof that character is built, not inherited. That love can turn a curse beginning into a blessed life. If you've listened this far, do me a favor. Subscribe. Share. Show me my story wasn't told in vain. And tell me where you're from. I want to know if my words are reaching women everywhere. My name used to be Emily Harper. Today I'm Emily Smith. Mother of Charles, grandmother of Mary Claire and John Robert, great-grandmother of Alice. I am the woman who chose life, not death. Love, not hate. Silence to protect, not words to destroy. And if I had to choose again, I'd do it all the same. Goodbye, Oak Ridge. Hello, forever new life. This was my story. Our story. A story of miracles, miracles we create ourselves.